Today we have a super exciting topic. We're talking about navigating the frontier of AI innovation, and in particular how we close the gap between this fast pace of innovation and the adoption in industry. And to help me untangle this topic, I'm joined by Sasha Rubel, who leads AI or generative AI policy for AWS at EMEA. And I have Alex Voica, who heads corporate affairs and policy for the AI company Synthesia. So welcome.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Happy to be here.
So I would love to get your perspective on this gap. Where are we today between this crazy innovation in AI and what is actually happening in industry?
So what we're seeing right now is that AI adoption is actually outpacing the uptake of mobile phones in the early 2000s. So that's an extraordinary effervescence around the adoption that's happening. But in parallel to this effervescence, there's actually what we've called a two-tier economy that's emerging. And that manifests on three different levels. The first is that startups are kind of steaming ahead, adopting AI faster than larger enterprises. Startups are going beyond productivity and efficiency gains and looking really not only at operational transformation, but more fundamentally, strategic reinvention of how AI can help them reimagine how they serve their customers and how they address the question of why. Why should we be adopting AI? What is the problem and how can AI help that? Whereas larger enterprises are still lagging behind in terms of adoption, really stuck a lot of the times at the productivity and efficiency gains phase. So startups and larger enterprise, that gap needs to be closed. The second gap that we're seeing is private sector is really steaming ahead in AI adoption versus the public sector. And this matters for several reasons. One is that when public sector adopts AI, it actually inspires trust, which is one of the biggest blockers to AI adoption, not only from citizens, but also from private sector companies. So public sector adoption can actually help the private sector accelerate AI adoption and make sure that we're really harnessing not only the economic benefits, but also the social benefits that this opportunity represents. The third gap that we're seeing is the gap between tech native, let's call it, and non-tech native companies. So tech native companies are adopting AI at a much faster pace than, let's call it, non-tech native companies or organizations in fields like agriculture or manufacturing. And this matters again because what we're seeing is that in fields like agriculture, this can totally transform the ways in which farmers, for example, mitigate supply chain challenges or address climate change or pest control. There's a great example that I love from a farmer named Matteo in Italy that actually founded a company without any engineering experience called X Farm that uses AI to actually address sustainability challenges related to his farming. And it started in Italy and it's now scaled across multiple countries. And so we're really seeing the need to close that gap because it's a big mistake to see this moment as a technological revolution. It's also a cultural one. So making sure that we're putting technology there and democratizing access to that technology, but also putting people first is one of the key ways in which we can close that gap that exists at those three levels.
Alex, you work with organizations all across the world.
Yeah.
Do you also see this gap?
Yeah, so if I look at our customer base, it's really interesting because we have like Fortune 500 type companies, and there it's very diverse. So it spans like automotive, consumer packaged goods, retail. And that's where we see a lot of adoption of Synthesia. But then we also have plans for small businesses and kind of middle-sized businesses. And there we also see how they're using it in very interesting ways. So just to give you an example of the kind of latter case, there's an organization called Just Dig It. They're a small organization, but they help farmers in East Africa regreen land. So one of the challenges there is that that part of the world, they speak multiple languages, and they need to be trained on how to plant different plants to kind of help with carbon capture. And what they've been able to do is they used to record these training videos, but it took a lot of time and it took a lot of effort. And now they're using our platform to make these videos instead. And they put everything on a mobile app, and they just send this mobile app out to farmers, and they watch the videos, and then immediately are able to sort of get to work. So that's one example of a small company that's moving much faster with AI than they would have previously. And then if I look at the kind of Fortune 100 type customers, I think we have plenty of examples there. And one of them that comes to mind is ServiceNow. So they have an academy type program where they train workers in digital skills. And they were able to cut production costs by 50% by using Synthesia. So they're moving much faster in terms of producing content and getting those courses up on the platform and in front of people. And they have an ambition to train 3 million people by next year. And that's, without that kind of scalability, it would have been very difficult to do. So I think there are kind of encouraging examples, both in the kind of large enterprises, as well as kind of small businesses as well.
So what examples or use cases excite you when you look at across your customer base?
There's one example that I come back to all the time, which is an example of a startup named Huron AI. Huron AI is a startup that provides personalized treatment and advice for breast cancer patients in Rwanda. It's now scaled from Rwanda to places like Kenya and elsewhere in East Africa, but also places like the United States. And it shows really concretely the ROI on what this technology represents. I think right now there are lots of conversations around what is the ROI in investing in this technology. Rwanda is a country where there's one doctor per 3,200 women who are actively suffering from breast cancer. There is no feasible way for that one doctor to see the 3,200 patients for multiple reasons. One is that a lot of these women are in rural areas, and so they can't come into the city because of costs or because of the rainy season. And the other is that simply the doctors just don't have enough time. And so the doctors have been working with Huron AI to develop a kind of personalized chatbot to make sure that women who wouldn't otherwise have access to personalized medicine can actually be followed with human oversight, not replacing the doctor, but augmenting the doctor's capacity to serve those who are most in need. And I think that's something that I find really compelling. Another example that I come back to time and again when I think about the importance of what this represents, not only in terms of GDP, because we talk a lot about what GDP could be unlocked through AI adoption, but it's more than GDP. It's also the social benefits that this represents, and more fundamentally, the question of human dignity. There's an organization in the United Kingdom called Halo Trust, who worked with a farmer named Mikhail. Mikhail is a farmer in Ukraine who within 3 months of the invasion could no longer farm his land. It meant that he could no longer feed his family. It meant that his daughter stopped going to school because he could not farm his land due to the landmines on the land. And so actually using our AI services, Halo Trust worked with farmers like Mikhail to demine that land and make sure that Mikhail could go back to farming, that he could feed his family, and that he could also empower his community to continue to thrive despite the extremely challenging situation that he found himself in. So when we talk about ROI, we need to think not only in terms of solving the biggest challenges that face the world right now, empowering economically communities and innovators that are closest to the problem, but also looking at the social transformation that this technology represents. What are the biggest challenges that we have, including, for example, accelerating drug discovery that we weren't able to do beforehand, that thanks to this technology, we can not only address, but also accelerate. There's another organization called Genentech who actually saved up to 43,000 hours of research time for drug discovery using generative AI. So I think right now the challenge and the opportunity that this represents is how can we come together across stakeholder groups and across countries, think about what are the challenges that need to be addressed the most urgently, and how can this technology be placed in a democratized way, safely and responsibly, in the hands of those that are closest to the problem so that they can solve them and that we can scale those solutions.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If you look across industries, across the biggest challenges we are facing, where are you excited about in terms of the application of generative AI?
Yeah, I think it's about scaling. If you think about it, Ukraine is a perfect example because of a country very open to adopting technology and deploying it quickly. And just kind of follow up on your example, we had a similar case where the Ministry of Social Services in Ukraine, there are parts of Ukraine that obviously are now under occupation, and the ministry was having a hard time reaching the citizens that were in those regions. And they tried to, and they also wanted to train more social workers to deliver programs to their citizens. So things like pensions or kind of child support, those types of services. And so what they did is they used Synthesia to make videos in Ukrainian and shared that content both on social media, as well as they built their own platform through which they deliver public services, and they were able to train their workers, and they did that in record time, and the impact was amazing. They were able to reach hundreds of thousands of people that they wouldn't have been able to do with kind of traditional ways of communicating, and they did that through video, which is a much more engaging way of communicating versus text. Before they used to send them these kind of like documents, and now they get a much more kind of interactive video with Synthesia. And I think that's what I'm excited about. This opportunity to which AI gives us is to kind of scale, in our case, scale the way organizations communicate, and then actually identify business needs and solve them with AI.